She called me an old fool, my own daughter. She laughed as she typed that she'd bled me dry. I sacrificed everything, my home, my memories, my life, to save her sight. I didn't realize the only one who was blind was me. If you're listening to this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. It helps to know I'm not completely alone. My name is Arthur Hayes. I'm 70 years old. I used to understand the world through order. For 40 years I worked in the county records office. My life was organization. Quiet routine, the satisfying click of a file cabinet closing. I balanced my checkbook every Friday night. Down to the penny. I didn't believe in debt. I believed in predictability. My world was beige, organized, and safe. My wife, Margaret, was the opposite. She was the music in my silent life. A spontaneous burst of color. She loved gardening. Our small home always smelled like roses, and the messy beauty of wildflowers. She was chaos, but she was beautiful chaos. When Margaret passed away 5 years ago, the music stopped. The silence in the house changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was just empty. The predictability I once cherished became a suffocating reminder of what I had lost. The house felt too big. The silence too loud. The only thing that filled the void, the only thing that kept Margaret's light alive, was Chloe, our daughter. Chloe, 24 years old, bright, ambitious, and so much like her mother in spirit. She had Margaret's laugh, her eyes, and her frustrating inability to keep track of her keys. Chloe always wanted the finer things, things my modest pension and carefully saved money couldn't easily provide. She lived downtown. Her apartment cost more than my mortgage. She was chasing a marketing career that always seemed just about to take off. I loved her more than anything. She was the last piece of Margaret I had left. I indulged her, maybe too much. I helped with her rent, covered her car repairs. I always made sure she had a safety net. I thought I was being a good father. I didn't realize I was building the scaffold for my own execution. It was a Tuesday afternoon in early March. The sky outside was a dull, heavy gray. I was repotting Margaret's old African violets. The soil was cool and damp under my fingers. It was a ritual, a small act of devotion. The phone rang. Its shrill sound cut through the quiet afternoon like a siren. I wiped my hands on my jeans and picked it up. "Hello? Dad. Dad, help me. Oh God, I can't breathe." Chloe's voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't a voice. It was a scream shredded by sheer terror. My heart stopped. The small ceramic pot I was holding slipped from my hand. It shattered on the kitchen floor. The dirt spilled out like an open wound. "Chloe? Sweetheart, what is it? What's wrong?" "My eyes," she sobbed, gasping for air. "I was at work. We were testing a new product, some kind of industrial cleaning solution. It exploded, Dad." I could hear the panic rising in her voice, raw and terrifying. "It went right in my eyes. It burns." I felt a wave of paralyzing fear wash over me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My Chloe, my vibrant, beautiful Chloe, injured. "Did you call 911? Are you at the hospital?" My voice was shaking. "I'm in a cab," she cried. Her voice was tight with pain. "The pain? Dad, it's getting dark." I stopped breathing. "Dark. Everything is blurry," she whispered, the terror escalating. "Oh God! Dad, I think I'm going blind." Blind. The word hit me like a physical blow. My Chloe, who loved photography, who inherited Margaret's love for beauty. Blind. The thought was unbearable. "I'm coming, Chloe. Which hospital?" "City General?" "No, not the hospital," she said quickly. Too quickly, but I was too panicked to notice the strangeness of it. "My boss called a specialist. Dr. Evans. He said the chemicals are aggressive. The ER won't know how to treat it." My mind raced. A specialist. That sounded right. That sounded necessary. "He's meeting me at his private clinic," she gasped. "Please, Dad, hurry." She gave me an address across town, an expensive district. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely find my car keys. I drove through the streets. The world outside my windshield was a blur. I prayed. I begged God. I begged Margaret not to let this happen. Not to Chloe. The clinic was in a sleek, modern building, all glass and steel. It looked expensive. It looked serious. When I burst through the doors, the waiting room was quiet. Too quiet. A young woman sat behind the reception desk. Her name tag read Anna. She looked up when I entered. her eyes wide with surprise. She quickly looked away, focusing on her computer screen. She was biting her lip. Nervous, her discomfort was palpable. I dismissed it as awkwardness. Chloe was huddled in a large leather chair. Her face was buried in her hands. She was wearing a silk blouse. It was stained with streaks of black mascara and something else. Something gritty and gray. "Chloe!" I rushed to her. I kneeled on the plush carpet. My knees protested the sudden movement. She flinched when I touched her shoulder. "Dad? Is that you?" Her voice was small, broken. "I can't see you. It's all black." She lifted her face. Her eyes were squeezed shut, inflamed and red around the edges. Tears streamed down her cheeks, carving paths through the grime. The sight of her helplessness, her utter terror, twisted something deep inside me. I would do anything to fix this. Anything. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." I held her hands. They were ice cold. The door to the inner office opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, impeccably dressed, in expensive-looking scrubs, a stethoscope draped around his neck. He exuded an air of calm professionalism. He looked like the kind of man who could fix anything. "Mr. Hayes?" Evan shook my hand firmly. His grip was strong, reassuring. "I've done a preliminary examination. It's not good." My stomach clenched. "The chemicals in that solution were highly alkaline," he explained. "They've caused severe burns to her corneas." He led me into his office. It was filled with intimidating equipment. Screens displayed magnified images of eyes. They looked damaged, inflamed. I felt small, ignorant in the face of this medical expertise. "The human eye is incredibly delicate," Dr. Evans explained. He pointed to a scan I didn't understand. The colors were angry reds and yellows. "The burns are deep. Without immediate aggressive intervention, the scar tissue will form rapidly." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The damage will be permanent. She will be blind." "Then we intervene," I said, desperate. The word blind echoed in my head. "Whatever it takes. Surgery? Transplants? Money is no object." Dr. Evans sighed. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, a gesture of weary resignation. "That's the complication. Standard treatments won't be enough." I held my breath. I knew what was coming. "There is an experimental therapy available," he continued. "It involves a series of injections. A new enzyme developed in Switzerland. It breaks down the scar tissue before it forms. It promotes corneal regeneration. It has a very high success rate." The dread pooled in my stomach, heavy and cold. "But it's expensive," I finished. "Very," he nodded. "And because it's experimental, insurance won't cover it." "Of course it wouldn't. We need to start the first round immediately. Tonight," he said, his voice urgent. "The initial cost for the enzyme serum and the procedure is $10,000. $10,000. We need it up front," he added gently. "To have the serum flown in. $10,000. That was my entire emergency fund. The money Margaret and I had saved for a rainy day. We had diligently put away a little bit every month for 40 years. This wasn't a rainy day. It was a monsoon." I looked through the glass partition at Chloe, huddled in the chair, looking so small, so terrified. I thought of Margaret, how she used to read to Chloe every night. I thought of my promise to Margaret on her deathbed, to always protect our daughter. There was no choice. "I'll transfer the money," I said, my voice tight. "Do whatever you have to do. Save her eyes." I went back to Chloe. I held her close. I tried to absorb her fear, to shield her from the darkness closing in. "It's going to be okay, honey. Dr. Evans is going to fix this. I promise." "I'm so scared, Dad," she whispered. Her body trembled against mine. "Thank you." Then she said the words that I would remember for the rest of my life. "You're saving me." That night I sat in the quiet waiting room. Chloe was undergoing the procedure. I watched the receptionist, Anna, packing up her bag. She looked pale, tired. As she walked past me, she hesitated. She looked back at the closed door of the operating room. Then at me, her eyes were filled with something I couldn't decipher. "Pity? Fear? Good luck, Mr. Hayes." she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then she hurried out the door. I thought she was worried about Chloe. I didn't realize she was worried about me. I felt a surge of protective love so strong it was painful. I was her father. This was my duty. I would give her everything I had. And I did. The next day, I brought Chloe home. Dr. Evans had wrapped her eyes in thick white bandages. They looked heavy, uncomfortable. The eyes must be completely protected from light, he explained with authority. His voice brokered no argument. Even a small amount of UV exposure could jeopardize the healing process. I nodded, absorbing every instruction. The bandages must stay on for at least 6 weeks, he continued. Absolute darkness is essential for the enzyme to work. 6 weeks. It seemed like a lifetime. Chloe couldn't go back to her downtown apartment. She needed constant care. So, my quiet, organized home became her sanctuary, and I became her eyes. My retirement vanished overnight. My days were no longer filled with gardening, reading, and peaceful solitude. They were filled with schedules, eye drops every hour, pain medications, specialized guidance with Dr. Evans 3 times a week. My life became a tightly wound clockwork of caregiving. I guided her to the bathroom. I held her arm gently, narrating the path. 2 steps down, honey, watch the corner of the rug. I cooked her meals, soft foods that were easy to eat. I cut her food into bite-sized pieces. I guided her fork to her mouth. It was difficult, humiliating for her. I held the fork steady. Chloe leaned forward. Her lips parted slightly. She missed. The fork scraped against her teeth. Food spilled onto her blouse. Her hands clenched into fists. Her jaw tightened. I can't do this, she cried, pushing the plate away. I hate being helpless. It's okay, honey, I soothed, cleaning up the mess. My back ached. It's just temporary. I read her emails to her, handled her bills, listened as she cried herself to sleep, terrified of the darkness surrounding her. It was exhausting, emotionally draining work. I felt the years pressing down on me, my energy depleted, but I did it gladly. I saw my sacrifice not as a burden, but as a privilege, a father's sacred duty. But the cost was higher than I imagined. 3 weeks passed. The initial $10,000 was gone, the follow-up appointments, the specialized medications, the cost of the imported serum. It all added up faster than I could track. The financial anxiety started to gnaw at me, a constant hum beneath the surface of my exhaustion. Then came the complication. We were sitting in the living room. I was reading the newspaper aloud to her, the monotonous drone of my voice, the only sound in the dimly lit room. We kept the lights low, always, for Chloe. Chloe suddenly gasped. She clutched her head. Her body went rigid. Dad, she screamed. The sound tore through the quiet house. The pain.
It's like knives in my eyes.
I rushed her back to Dr. Evans' clinic. The drive was frantic. Every red light felt like a personal affront. I ran my hand through my hair, the stress making my scalp tingle. When we arrived, the reception desk was empty. Anna was gone, replaced by a sterile silence. Dr. Evans examined her. His expression was grim. He didn't look reassuring anymore. He looked worried. The regeneration process is stalling, he said. His voice was low and urgent. There's inflammation building up. We need to move to the second phase of the treatment. I braced myself. It's more aggressive, he continued. A localized laser therapy combined with a stronger serum. How much? The words tasted like ash in my mouth. $15,000? I stared at him. $15,000? I didn't have it. My emergency fund was gone. My checking account was nearly empty. I was bleeding money. Dr. Evans, I hesitated. The shame of my financial limitations burned in my throat. I had always been the provider, the protector. Now I was failing. Mr. Hayes, he said, his voice softening, but the urgency still there. Without this procedure, the initial treatment will fail. The inflammation will cause irreversible damage. You didn't have to say the rest. I knew. We have a very small window, he insisted. If we wait, she will lose her sight completely. I went home that night. The weight of the world was pressing down on me. I sat in my study. I looked around. The room was filled with memories. The tangible evidence of a life lived fully. My collection of rare stamps, carefully assembled over decades. A legacy from my own father. My grandfather's antique barometer. A beautiful piece of brass and mahogany. The silver tea set Margaret and I received on our wedding day. Polished to a high shine, they were just things, but they were my things. My history. The next day, I called an estate dealer, Mr. Blackwood, a man with sharp eyes and a predatory smile. He arrived in a sleek black car that looked out of place in my quiet neighborhood. He wore an expensive suit and a look of bored indifference. I watched as he examined the stamps, the silver, the barometer. His eyes were cold and calculating. He didn't see memories. He saw dollar signs. He picked up the silver tea set, turning it over in his hands. His touch was careless, disrespectful. He held the teapot up to the light, squinting, his lips pursed in a dismissive frown. "It's a nice piece," he said, his voice smooth, oily. "But the market for silver is down. And this? It's tarnished." I flinched. Tarnished? I polished it every week. He was lying. He was hunting for a bargain. He looked at the stamps, flipping through the pages with careless indifference. "Stamps are a niche market," he said with a shrug. He offered me $8,000 for the lot. It was a fraction of what they were worth. I knew it. He knew it. "Mr. Blackwood, the stamps alone are worth more than that," I protested, my voice weak. He smiled, a cold, pitying smile. "Take it or leave it, Mr. Hayes. I have other appointments today. And frankly, you look like a man in desperate need of cash." His arrogance was staggering, his cruelty casual. It felt like selling my past, selling my memories, piece by agonizing piece. But I did it. For Chloe, it wasn't enough. I still needed $7,000. I looked at my car in the driveway. A 2015 Toyota Camry, meticulously maintained. Low mileage. It was my only mode of transportation, my lifeline to the outside world, my independence. But Chloe needed to see. I sold the car to a local dealership. They gave me $7,500. I handed the money to Dr. Evans. Cash. He insisted on cash. Another red flag I ignored. I walked home from the dealership. The 3-mile walk left my knees aching, my breath short. I told myself it was worth it. Every step was a step towards Chloe's recovery. But a small voice in the back of my head whispered a dangerous question. Was it? We were now 2 months into this nightmare. The total cost had exceeded $30,000. My safety net was gone. I was standing on the edge of financial ruin. But I kept telling myself that Chloe was getting better. Slowly, she claimed. The bandages were still on, but the headaches were less frequent. She seemed calmer, more resigned to her temporary darkness. But the slow bleed continued. The imported medications became more expensive. Dr. Evans prescribed specialized supplements, organic diets to reduce inflammation. "We have to control every variable, Arthur," he told me during one of our weekly check-ins. His voice smooth, convincing. He even recommended an air purification system for the house. A top-of-the-line model. It cost $1,500. "The toxins in the air can hinder the healing process," he explained smoothly. His justifications always sounded plausible, scientific. I bought it all. I started making sacrifices that cut to the bone. I stopped buying my favorite coffee. I canceled my cable subscription. I turned the thermostat down, living in a perpetual chill. The cold seeped into my bones. It made my arthritis flare up. My joints ached with a constant, dull pain. But I told myself, Chloe needed the money more than I needed comfort. I started eating less, canned soup and toast for dinner. My portions grew smaller and smaller. I lost weight. My clothes hung loose on my frame. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at me, an old, tired man, frayed around its edges. I was disappearing. My neighbor, George, noticed the changes. George and I had been friends for 30 years. He was a retired cop, cynical by nature but fiercely loyal. He used to come over every Thursday for cards, When I canceled for the 5th week in a row, he came knocking. "Arthur, you look like hell," he said bluntly. He looked past me into the dimly lit living room. The lights were always dimmed for Chloe's comfort. "It's the stress, George. Chloe's recovery is slow." George frowned. His gaze was sharp, analytical. The cop in him never really retired. "Slow? After 30 grand? What exactly is this treatment?" "It's experimental," I said, repeating the words Dr. Evans used. "A new enzyme therapy from Switzerland." George shifted his weight. His police instincts were kicking in. I could see the suspicion in his eyes. "Experimental? Arthur, be careful. Are you sure this Dr. Evans is legit?" The question stung. "You should get a second opinion," George continued, pushing the point. "My nephew is an ophthalmologist at City General. I could ask him to take a look. No charge." I felt a flare of anger, hot and defensive. How dare he question my decisions? My daughter's sight was on the line. How dare he imply I was being foolish? "George, I appreciate your concern, but I have this under control," I said stiffly. My voice was colder than I intended. "Dr. Evans is a specialist. Chloe is suffering enough without people second-guessing her doctor." "I'm just worried about you, Arthur," George said softly. His eyes were filled with genuine concern, and this whole situation, it smells funny. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "A clinic that demands cash up front? No insurance? No second opinions? These are red flags, Arthur. Big ones. It's none of your business," I snapped. And I closed the door in his face. I immediately felt guilty. George was a good friend, but the stress was fraying my nerves. I couldn't handle doubt. I had to believe in the treatment. I had to believe I was saving her. If I didn't believe, then the sacrifices, the pain, the fear, it was all for nothing. I couldn't accept that. But the doubt, once planted by George, started to grow, like a weed in Margaret's untended garden. Small inconsistencies nagged at me. Things I had dismissed before, now they took on a sinister significance. One afternoon I was cleaning the kitchen. Chloe was sitting at the table, supposedly listening to an audiobook. I dropped a spoon. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. The spoon clattered loudly on the tile floor. The sound was sharp, sudden. Chloe flinched, but her head turned, and her eyes beneath the bandages seemed to track the movement of the spoon as it fell. I froze, watching her. She quickly recovered, turning her head back towards her phone. "What was that, Dad?" she asked, her voice innocent. Too innocent? I dismissed it. Maybe she was reacting to the sound. My mind was playing tricks on me. Stress does that. Another time, I walked into her room without knocking. I was carrying a tray of food. My hands were full. The door creaked open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn tight. She was holding her phone. The screen illuminated her face. Her thumbs were moving rapidly across the screen, typing. When she heard me, she quickly shoved the phone under her pillow. Her movements were swift, too swift for someone who couldn't see. "What are you doing, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just listening to music," she said quickly. Her voice was slightly breathless. The voice commands are tricky. I keep messing them up. Her explanation was smooth. Practice, but it felt wrong. A cold knot of suspicion tightened in my stomach. How could she text so fast using voice commands? The financial stress was becoming unbearable. By the 4th month, we were closing in on 50,000. I had liquidated my small stock portfolio, the last bastion of my financial security. I was running on fumes. I needed new reading glasses. My old ones were scratched. My vision was blurring. I checked my wallet. $5 and some change. I had given Chloe the last $100 that morning. Another consultation fee for Dr. Evans. I couldn't afford the glasses. The irony was bitter, cruel. I was going broke saving her sight while neglecting my own. And Chloe, despite her condition, seemed to grow more demanding, less patient. The sweet girl I raised was replaced by someone short-tempered and critical, her voice sharp with entitlement. "Dad, this chicken is dry," she complained one night. She pushed the plate away with a gesture of disgust. I had spent an hour cooking it. I'm sorry, honey. I'm tired. I know, but I need proper nutrition for the healing process, she snapped. Dr. Evans said so. Can't you just order something? I'm sick of soup and dry chicken. Order something? With what money? The constant demands grated on me. The sense of entitlement was staggering. My home didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a prison. I was both the warden and the inmate. One afternoon, while doing laundry, I found something that made my blood run cold. A receipt tucked into the pocket of her jeans. It was from a high-end boutique downtown, dated 2 days prior. A dress and shoes, totaling over $800. $800. I was eating toast for dinner. I confronted her. The receipt was trembling in my hand. Chloe, what is this? She didn't miss a beat. Her lies were effortless now. Oh, that. My friend Sarah bought those for me. She came by while you were at the store. I hadn't seen Sarah, but I had been at the store. She wanted to cheer me up, Chloe continued, her voice softening, manipulative. She felt bad that I couldn't see how beautiful I looked. It was plausible. Sarah was a good friend, but the timing felt suspicious. I decided to call Sarah. I needed to know the truth. I needed to hear her voice. I dialed her number. My hands were shaking. Hello? Sarah answered, her voice bright and cheerful. Sarah, it's Arthur, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I just wanted to thank you for the clothes you bought for Chloe. It was very generous of you. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A hesitation. A beat, too long. The silence stretched. I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background. Oh yes, of course. Arthur, Sarah said, her voice suddenly strained. Forced. Anything for Chloe? I hope she likes them. She was lying. I could hear it in her voice. The nervousness. The hesitation. The guilt. The cold knot in my stomach tightened. I felt a deep unease. A growing realization that something was terribly wrong. The betrayal wasn't just Chloe's. It was spreading, but I suppressed it. I couldn't face the alternative. The alternative was too monstrous, too devastating. My daughter wouldn't lie about something like this. She couldn't. Then came the final blow. Dr. Evans said the inflammation is fighting back, she said. Her voice was choked with tears. She was a good actress. I had to give her that. The performance was convincing. The fear in her voice sounded real. The laser therapy didn't work as well as he hoped. She sobbed. There's one last option. I closed my eyes. I was so tired. The fight had gone out of me. What is it, Chloe? A surgery, a synthetic cornea transplant. It's the only way to stabilize my vision. She was hysterical now, grasping my arm, her nails digging into my skin. He said, if we don't do it now, I will be completely blind forever. I already knew the next question, and I dreaded the answer. How much? $25,000. I stared at her. The silence stretched between us. $25,000. It might as well have been $1 million. Chloe, I don't have it. My voice was hollow, defeated. I've given you everything. The accounts are empty. The stocks are gone. The car is gone. I spread my hands, a gesture of helplessness. I have nothing left. But Dad, she pleaded. Her voice rising in panic. The performance was ramping up. You have to find a way. You can't let me live in darkness. Tears streamed down her face. Real tears. I didn't know anymore. Please, Dad, I don't want to be blind. There is no way, I shouted. The desperation finally broke through. The anger, the frustration, the fear. It all came pouring out. Then her voice changed. The panic disappeared, replaced by something cold, calculating. The house, Dad, she whispered. Her voice was suddenly small, manipulative. You can sell the house. I stared at her, shocked by the suggestion. It's paid off, she continued, pressing her advantage. It's worth a lot. Then she delivered the final knife twist. It's just wooden bricks, Dad. I'm your daughter. Sell the house? The home Margaret and I built together? The place where Chloe took her first steps? The place where Margaret took her last breath? The garden she loved so much? It wasn't just wooden bricks. It was my life, The thought paralyzed me. I felt trapped, suffocated by the impossible choice. My past or her future. My sanctuary or her sight. I went to the bank the next day. I sat across from the bank manager. Mr. Davis, a young man in a crisp suit. He looked at me with thinly veiled pity. He saw an old man making a foolish mistake. Mr. Hayes, a home equity loan is a significant risk at your age, he advised gently. His voice dripped with condescension. Your pension is modest. If you can't make the payments, the bank will have to foreclose. Foreclose, the word hung in the air, ugly and threatening. It's for my daughter's medical needs, I insisted. My pride stung, the shame of begging for money, of leveraging the last piece of security I had. It was heavy. Mr. Davis sighed, shuffling the papers on his desk. He avoided eye contact. He pushed the loan application across the desk, his movements slow, deliberate. I understand, Mr. Hayes, he said, his voice flat, but I have to warn you. These situations often end badly. We see it all the time. Family, money, it's a toxic combination. I ignored his warning. I ignored the pity in his eyes. I ignored the cold dread pooling in my stomach. I signed the papers. I signed away my home. The loan was approved. The $25,000 would be available the next day. I came home that evening. The weight of the decision was heavy on my shoulders. I had done it. I had sacrificed everything. But Chloe would see again. It had to be worth it. I couldn't sleep that night. The anxiety, the fear, the gnawing doubt I had suppressed for months. It all came rushing back. A tidal wave of dread. George's words echoed in my head. Kit smells funny. Sarah's nervous voice on the phone. Mr. Davis's warning. Mr. Blackwood's predatory smile. I felt restless, agitated. The house felt too small. The silence, too loud. I needed a glass of water. It was around 2 a.m. The house was silent, bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight filtering through the curtains. I walked down the hallway towards the kitchen. My footsteps were silent on the carpet. As I passed the living room, I stopped. Chloe was sitting on the couch. She must have thought I was asleep. The bandages were not on her face. They were pushed up onto her forehead, like a headband. She was holding her phone. The screen illuminated her face, casting a sickly blue glow on her features. And she was reading. Her eyes were moving rapidly, tracking the text on the screen. Her thumbs were flying as she typed a message. I froze. The air left my lungs. It was a physical blow, sharper and more painful than any injury I'd ever sustained. The world stopped spinning. Everything became hyper-focused, crystal clear. I watched her, my daughter, the person I had sacrificed everything for. Her eyes were perfect, clear, focused, alive. She wasn't blind. She had never been blind. The chemical accident, the burns, the experimental treatments, the imported medicines. Dr. Evans. It was all a lie. A cruel, elaborate scam designed to bleed me dry. I felt sick. A wave of nausea washed over me. 4 months of torture. $50,000 gone. My car, my savings, my memories, my home. All sacrificed at the altar of her greed. Silently, carefully, I stepped closer. I needed to see. I needed to know the full extent of her cruelty. I needed to understand why the daughter I loved had become a monster. I leaned over the back of the couch, just enough to see the screen. The message she was typing burned itself into my memory, seared into my soul. It was addressed to someone named Kevin. I remembered the name, her boyfriend, a slick, ambitious young man I never liked. Chloe claimed he had broken up with her just before the accident. The old fool took the loan, $25 more, and we are set. Vegas, baby, and then the words that destroyed me. It's easier to fool an old man than a child. She chuckled, a soft, cruel sound that shattered what was left of my heart. It was a sound devoid of humanity, of compassion. I stood there watching her smile, the smile I used to adore, the smile that reminded me of Margaret. Now it was a mask of greed and deceit, a grotesque parody of the daughter I once knew. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I felt a profound, paralyzing sadness, a grief deeper than when Margaret died. Margaret was taken by illness, a cruel twist of fate. Chloe chose to destroy me. She chose to murder the love I had for her. The silence in the room stretched, heavy and suffocating. I stood there, an old man drowning in the realization of his own foolish love. I took a deep breath. Steadying myself, I walked around the couch and stood in front of her. She was still engrossed in her phone, that cruel smile playing on her lips. "Chloe," I said. My voice was surprisingly calm, devoid of emotion. She jumped, startled. A gasp escaped her lips. Her eyes snapped up to meet mine. They were wide, clear, and full of shock. The realization hit her instantly. She knew I knew. Her smile disappeared. She fumbled for the bandages on her forehead. Her movements were frantic, clumsy in her panic, pulling them down over her eyes. The performance resumed, instinctive, desperate. "Dad?"
Aye. The treatment. It's working.
Her voice was high-pitched. "Fake. It's a miracle. I can see a little. The shadows. They're clearing up." "Stop it," I said. The calmness in my voice turned cold, hard as steel. "Stop lying." "I'm not lying," she insisted, her voice trembling. "Evans said this might happen." Temporary clarity. "It's a sign the surgery will work." She was grasping at straws. The lies tumbled out of her mouth, chaotic and unconvincing. I reached down and picked up her phone from her lap. The text message to Kevin was still on the screen. "Read this," I demanded. I held the phone out to her. She flinched as if I had struck her. "I don't know what you're talking about. I can't see it, Dad. It's too bright." "Read it out loud, Chloe." My voice was flat, dead. It's easier to fool an old man than a child. Silence hung heavy in the room. The only sound was the ticking of the clock in the hallway, measuring the seconds of my shattered reality. Then the mask shattered completely. She slowly lifted the bandages. Her face hard. The sweetness was replaced by a cold, calculating defiance that chilled me to the bone. "Fine," she spat. She stood up, facing me, not as a daughter, but as an adversary. "Fine. You found out. So what? So what?" My voice trembled with the effort to remain calm. The suppressed rage bubbled beneath the surface. "I gave you everything, Chloe. $50,000. I sold my car. I liquidated my savings. I took a loan against this house." I paused, the magnitude of the betrayal hitting me all over again. "For what?" "So you and Kevin could go to Vegas. I deserved that money," she screamed. The sudden rage erupted like a volcano. Her face contorted in an ugly mask of entitlement. "You were hoarding it, sitting here in this dusty old house, living in the past, clinging to Mom's memory." The cruelty of her words was breathtaking. "You're old, Dad," she continued, her voice dripping with contempt. "What were you going to do with it?" "I have a life. I have needs." "Needs? You lied about going blind." My voice rose to match hers. "You manipulated me. You used my love for you as a weapon. You used my grief for your mother." The words tasted like poison on my tongue. "Oh, stop being so dramatic," she scoffed. She rolled her eyes. The gesture, so casual, so dismissive, twisted the knife deeper. "I needed the money. Kevin had an investment opportunity. A sure thing. We needed capital." She tossed her hair, a gesture of defiance. "You wouldn't have given it to me if I asked. An investment? You stole my life savings for an investment?" The absurdity of it was staggering. "We were going to pay you back," she said. Her voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Lie." The anger finally broke through, hot and cleansing. "You mocked me. You called me an old fool. Because you are," she sneered. Her voice was filled with contempt. "You were so easy to manipulate, so eager to play the hero. My poor blind daughter." She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. It was pathetic. Pathetic? That's what she thought of my love, my sacrifice. My devotion was a joke to her. "And Dr. Evans?" I asked, my voice hollow. I needed to know everything. "Dr. Evans is Kevin's cousin." She laughed again. "He's not even a real doctor. He works at a Botox clinic." The pieces clicked into place. The expensive scrubs, the professional demeanor. The receptionist, Anna, who looked so uncomfortable. She must have known. "The clinic space?" I asked. "We rented it by the hour," she said, smiling. Proud of her deception. The bandages were itchy, by the way. 4 months of pretending to be helpless. It was exhausting. The depth of the deception was staggering. It wasn't just a lie. It was a performance. A calculated, cold-blooded plan to rob me of everything I held dear. She walked towards the door, grabbing her purse, an expensive new purse I realized I had paid for. "I'll be staying with Kevin. Don't try to contact me." "Wait," I said. She stopped, looking back at me, with impatience, as if I were an inconvenience, a loose end to be tied up. "What now? Are you going to cry? Beg me to stay?" "No," I said. I pulled my own phone out of my pocket. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was steel. "You're going to wait for the police." Chloe's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in anger. "You wouldn't dare." She took a step towards me, threatening. "You can't prove anything," she hissed. "It's your word against mine. And who are they going to believe? The grieving daughter who just regained her sight, or the confused old man who's having a breakdown?" "I can prove it," I said. My voice was steady now. I walked over to the mantelpiece. I pointed to the small, discreet security camera nestled among Margaret's photographs. I had installed it years ago, when Margaret first got sick, so I could monitor her when I was in the garden. I had forgotten it was even there. It was pointed directly at the couch. Chloe followed my gaze. Her face turned ashen. The camera's small red light blinked silently, a silent witness to her betrayal, to her confession. The arrival of the police was swift. I didn't have to say much. I just showed them the recording. The footage of Chloe, perfectly sighted, typing the damning text message. The audio of her confession. Her cruel words echoing in the quiet room. The venom in her voice, undeniable. Chloe screamed and fought as they arrested her. Fraud, grand larceny, financial elder abuse. The charges were serious. She shouted threats, accusations, blaming me for ruining her life. The transformation from the sweet, vulnerable victim to the enraged criminal was complete. "Dad, please, don't let them take me," she screamed as the officers led her out the door. Her voice was suddenly small, desperate. The little girl returning for one last manipulation. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just watched her go. The red and blue lights flashed across the windows of the house I no longer recognized as my home. George was standing on his porch. He had seen the cars from his window. He walked over and put a comforting hand on my shoulder. He didn't say anything for a long time. We just stood there in the cold night air. "I'm sorry, Arthur," he said softly. "I'm so sorry." "Thank you, George," I whispered. The exhaustion finally hit me, the adrenaline receding, leaving only the wreckage of my life. "I should have listened to you." "You loved her, Arthur," George said. "That's not a weakness. That's being a father." He paused, looking at the empty driveway where the police car had been. The weakness was hers. The aftermath was a blur of legal proceedings and financial devastation. Chloe and Kevin, along with the fake Dr. Evans, were charged. The case was clear-cut. The evidence from the security camera was overwhelming. We also tracked down Anna, the receptionist. George used his old police contacts. She was terrified, but she testified against them, admitting she was paid to keep quiet, to look the other way. Sarah also confessed, admitting she had lied to cover for Chloe. Consumed by guilt, they all took plea deals. They went to prison. The money was gone. They had spent it all. Clothes, a new car for Kevin, expensive dinners, and the down payment on a condo they never got to live in. I never saw a dime of it back. The $25,000 loan I had taken out was canceled, thanks to the fraud charges and Mr. Davis's testimony about my desperation. But the damage was done. I had to sell the house. With my depleted savings and the emotional scars that tainted every room, I couldn't afford the upkeep, and I couldn't bear the memories. Every corner held a ghost. Margaret's laughter, Chloe's betrayal. I moved into a small apartment in a retirement community. It was strange. Starting over at 7, the apartment was small, impersonal. I didn't have much left, just a few boxes of photographs and Margaret's African violets. The silence returned, heavier and colder than before. The grief comes in waves, Not for the woman in the orange jumpsuit who stares back at me from the newspaper clippings, but for the daughter I thought I had. The little girl in the yellow dress, who used to chase butterflies in the garden. That girl was gone, murdered by greed. One evening, I was unpacking the last box. I picked up a picture of Margaret and me on our wedding day. We were so young, so full of hope, so naive about the darkness that lurked in the human heart. I traced Margaret's face with my finger. "I'm so sorry, Margaret," I whispered. "I failed her. I failed you." I look at the photo. I realize that true family isn't just about blood. It's about love, trust, and respect. Elaine broke that trust. She chose greed over love. I am an old man. I am alone. I was fooled. But as I looked at the photograph, I realized something profound. The true blindness wasn't in the eyes. It was in the heart that refused to see the darkness hiding in the light, the heart that loved too much, too blindly, and finally, painfully, I could see. I lost my daughter that day. But I regained my dignity. I regained the truth. And sometimes the truth, however devastating, is the only thing worth saving.